Often imitated, but never duplicated. Except for its sequels, really. We'll get there. All right, everybody, we're going back to 1979 to look at a motion picture that launched it all. It launched a whole bunch of copycats. It launched a whole bunch of successful sequels. It did what it did. We're talking about the original Mad Max. But before we go any further, before we dig into this gem anymore, once and again, and as always, to the trailer.
Tomorrow, in a world gone mad. The only law will be a renegade squad of suicidal cops.
He's my prisoner, and he's not walking out that door.
And the open road will be controlled by gangs of glory roaders. Max is a cop, one of the best.
Where does they're out to get you? Scoot jockeys? Yeah, nomad trash. Well, I'll add it to my thread collection.
You made the music. Who was he?
Don't know. Just another glory roader, I guess.
Toecutter is a glory roader, one of the most sadistic.
Anything I say, anything you say, what a wonderful philosophy you have. Take him away.
I want my baby.
You've not got a sense of humor.
Please, don't hurt my baby.
You've got a pretty face, though.
Both want the other dead. But only one can have his way. Mad Max. You don't want to make Max mad. Because when Max gets mad, he gets even. American International presents Mad Max, the maximum force of the future.
All right, this motion picture was directed by George Miller. Now, obviously, he did this. He did The Road Warrior. He did Beyond Thunderdome. But he also did The Witches of Eastwick. He also did Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2. I know, you can hardly picture that. He did Lorenzo Zoil. He did a segment of the Twilight Zone movie. He did Babe, Pig in the City. And a few years ago, he gave us the incredible Mad Max Fury Road. Just the way it is, just the way it goes. Did some cool shit. Let's keep moving. Playing Max Rockatansky. And how can you get a last name cooler than Rockatansky? I mean, well, except for maybe Pliskin. But it is what it is. We're talking about Mel Gibson. Let's go. Of course, he was in the sequel, The Road Warrior. He was in the other sequel, Beyond Thunderdome. And he was also in a whole bunch of other stuff. We're talking Air America, What Women Want, Tim, Gallipoli, The River, Lethal Weapon, Braveheart, The Year Living Dangerously, Signs, The Patriot. We Were Soldiers, Ransom and Payback, and The Man Without a Face, and Bird on a Wire, and a movie you have to go back and see, and it never gets talked about enough, and it really pisses me off, really. It was a movie he did called The Bounty. Yes, Fletcher Christian and the whole crew. It's been done before. It was a great version. He was great in it. Go check it out. Playing the Toecutter, Hugh Keays-Byrne. This guy was on stage. He was on TV. He was in movies. He did it all. Let's get rolling. Of course, he was in little flicks like Blood of Heroes, Strikebound, Stage, Mad Dog Morgan, Stone, Bluefin, and a bunch of TV. We're talking like Ben Hall and Secret Valley and Runaway Island and Moby Dick and Farscape and 5 Mile Creek and The Outsiders. Not the ones with like Ralph Macchio and all that shit, whatever. But The Outsiders. And of course, he came back to star in Mad Max Fury Road. How cool was that, seeing him pop back up and Rona Joe is what it was. He's gone now, but he left a cool little legacy, is what it is. Playing Jessie Rockatansky. Joanne Samuel. She was a face on TV even before this, but we'll get to all that later. We're talking about she was on little things like Certain Women, The Young Doctors, Ratbags, Skyways, 5 Times Dizzy, Hey Dad, Brock, Class of 74, and, she did some movies on occasion, like, Early Frost and Allison's Birthday, but, more of a TV person. She was a TV person before she even got into this motion picture. Is what it was. Let's keep going. Playing Johnny the Boy, Tim Burns. Not really a big career, actually, but he's in a few things. We're talking about he popped up in little things like Patrol Boat, Glenview High, Cop Shop, The Dismissal, and some movies, movies with smaller roles like The Chain Reaction and Kathy's Child, The Boy Who Had Everything, The Knight and the Prowler. So, he was around, not really a big career, but he did a kick-ass job in this. That's all that matters. Playing Goose! Old friend of Mel Gibson's. We're in another movie together. They went to acting school together. The one and only Steve Bisley. Let's crank this out. He was on TV too. We're talking about he was in a bunch of shit like The Patchwork Hero, Jonah, The Last Outlaw, Cop Shop, Call Me Mr., Police Rescue, Breaking News, Escape from Jupiter, Sea Patrol, Doctor, East of Everything, Water Rats. So, big TV career over there. I mean, popped up movies and too. A lot of these people were a lot of them were like TV people that segued into flicks, but, a lot of TV work. And lastly, playing Fifi, Roger Ward. Again, big career, a lot of credits. Mostly TV, but some movies. Let's go. We're talking about he was in little things like Runaway Island, and Carson's Law, and A Country Practice, and Lion's Den, and Heartbreak High, and Cop Shop, and Sarah Dane, and Matlock Police, and Number 96. And again, like I said, he also popped up in movies here, there, a little bit of everywhere. It is what it was, as was it went, just the way it is. Let's get going to the story. All right, everybody, we're going to do this in 90 seconds or less, so we can keep it short, keep it fast, keep it entertaining, keep it moving, so we can get to where we would much rather be, the summation. And that's where we have our most fun. And I know that you guys all probably know the story to this. It is what it is. It's Mad Max, for Christ's sakes. But we're going to go by the numbers and get it out of the way and cut to the chase. You got this guy, the Nightrider. He has just escaped and stolen a police special, this blue, amped-up hot rod, and he is laying down the rubber road to freedom. To quote him, he's got his floozy girlfriend with him, and he's being chased by a couple pursuit specials, some police officers from the Main Force Patrol, and they are trying to arrest him. But what they do is they drive him right into the hands of the interceptor himself, Max Rockatansky. And before you know it, the Nightrider dies. Just the way it goes, folks. And then you get to see Max go back home. You get to see his wife, his kid. You realize that Max is just a normal family man who just happens to be out on the road driving the baddies to their doom. The thing about Max, though, is he doesn't want to be a police officer anymore. He can't take it. He's doing everything he can to quit. He just wants to leave and be a normal guy. A, to spend more time with his family. B, because he's starting to turn into one of the psychos out on the road that kind of maybe is getting a little bit of his rocks off by doing this kind of shit. Is what it is. The police force is always trying to entice old Max to stick around a little bit longer, giving him amped up cars, teasing him with a little bit of V8 candy so that he doesn't leave the police force because he's their best guy. It's just the way it goes. They need him on the force. Meanwhile, the Nightrider had some friends in this motorcycle gang led by the Toecutter and Bubba Zanetti. Well, they come looking for old Max because, they want a little bit of revenge. And on the way in there, they stop in this little town where they wreak some havoc. They cause some damage. They attack a girl and her boyfriend. They destroy his car. And who finds us the very next day? Yes, Max Rockatansky and his best buddy Goose. Oh, they arrest this guy, Johnny the Boy. He's a mess. He's the last of the gang members that didn't leave when he should have left, got himself arrested, taken into custody, winds up getting released because nobody would show up in trial for him. Bubba Zanetti takes him, leads him off, and then he comes back at one point to sabotage the motorcycle of one Goose, which, through a couple of different means and ways, leads to the Goose being set on fire and put in the hospital. Not a good thing. This drives Max crazy. This is pushing him right to the edge. But he's ready to quit again. Wants out. Fifi says, his captain, hey, go have a vacation. But on the vacation, things go wrong. The biker gang finds them. Bad shit takes place. And all of a sudden, Max loses everything in the world he ever cared about. His wife and his child. And that unleashes a side of Max that, has been hiding dormant and under the surface for quite some time. Does he get revenge? You know he's going out for revenge. You already seen this. Let's knock off the bullshit. But it doesn't make a difference. He's going to go out there and do what Max Rockatansky does, the Road Warrior himself, and seek some vengeance. I'm not going to tell you how it ends. You probably already know. Doesn't really make a difference. Let's get on to the summation. All right. All right. Does Mad Max work? Yes, Mad Max works. That's like one of the biggest no-shit statements in the history of the world. Yes, of course it does. This movie is phenomenal. It's incredible. And it launched a whole genre of film. Before we dig into all that, before we tear into it anymore, though, let's get the big three out of the way. The directing. The directing is great. Some of the editing could be a little bit choppy here or there, but the directing itself, the use of angles, the views, the way that they capture things in the camera, it's amazing. Enough said. That's all you need to know. The writing. The writing is what it is. It's not incredible, but it's definitely not bad. I mean, let's face it, this movie is a visual feast with a little bit of words here and there thrown in. It's very driven by imagery. Where there is dialogue, the dialogue works. But let's be honest, this is not a movie driven by a lot of dialogue. This is a movie driven by visuals and visual storytelling. And the acting. Come on, man. The acting in this is all that you need, especially in this kind of motion picture. We're talking about Mel Gibson delivers as Max, even though he's only like 20 years old at the time, which is friggin' ridiculous if you think about it. But he delivered. Hugh Keays-Byrne as the Toecutter. Come on, man. The guy is awesome in this role. He really nailed it. Brought so much different flavors to one guy. Just knocked it out the park. And even the supporting cast, you know what I mean? They all did it. Tim Burns was really great as Johnny the Boy. We're talking about people that brought it and delivered to a little motion picture that probably, if you read it on paper, you'd be like, come on, seriously? All right, but let's get back to why this motion picture works. Obviously, it's always going to be remembered for its dark, brooding story and its insane, over-the-top action. And we're going to touch on all that. But before we get to that, before we get into that whole section of this thing, let's talk about what sometimes people really don't talk about as much, and what separates this really from all the other imitators and copycats and all that kind of stuff, is the story of a broken man. Come on, let's face it, if you didn't care about Max Rockatansky, you're not going to give a shit about this motion picture. Plain and simple. But you see who this man is, you see who he wants to be and what he's trying to do with his life, and you see the whole thing fall apart before him. You see this guy who's a loving dad and who's a loving husband and who wants to get out of this rat race that he's wrapped up in, this future world that's just gone completely apeshit crazy, but that slowly gets taken away from him and denied from him when he loses his best friend. You see the cracks, you see it start to come apart. And then he loses his wife and his child. And he is finally broken, he's finally destroyed, and he finally goes from being what he could have been into what he didn't want to be, which is another one of those road street machine whack jobs running up and down the highway in the desolate wasteland. He didn't want to become that, and that's what he became 110%. So it's a story of a broken man who loses everything, who wanted to be one thing, tried to avoid being another thing, and then wound up being that thing, not through his own fault, but through the fault of the world and life itself. So it's a crushing story, it's a sad story, and then because you care about Max, you care about that story, you can throw all the crazy bullshit around it with cars and bikers and fucking whatever else is going on in this thing. It works because of him. Now, one of the brilliant things they did in this motion picture is they set up Max right from the get-go as basically a mythical figure. I mean, just the way George Miller made it, so you don't even see him for like the first 5, 6, 7 minutes of the motion picture. You see parts of him, you see him at a distance, you see his boots, you see the sunglasses in the eyes in the mirror, you see his hands in the rubber gloves, and this goes on for a while, and then it ain't even until the original chase is over with that you actually see him get out of a car, and you're like, oh, that's the guy. So they built him up to this epic, mythical figure before the first scene showing his face. That right there is brilliant directing, brilliant editing, And more importantly, what George Miller does best is brilliant storytelling. And that is what makes this movie work. The storytelling. He does it in an epic way. He does it in a mythical way. He does it in a tragic way. And it lands 110% on point. That's why this movie lasts. Also, you're only going to get a couple kinds of movies about the future. You're going to get dystopian or utopian. And utopian is like, Star Trek The Next Generation. Everything's fine. Everybody loves each other. There's no money and all that. Or you have dystopian. And you know what movies I mean. You're talking about Blade Runner, THX 1138. You're talking about Escape from New York. You're talking about Mad Max, where the future is bleak. And let's be honest, with the nature of mankind, that's probably what you're going to get anyway. So that was always more entertaining and more believable and more enthralling and engulfing. And this motion picture lands on that perfectly. You never really get explained what the hell happened or what's going on. You just know society's got some serious friggin' problems. Was there a war? Was there a nuclear assault? Did the economy just collapse? They don't really explain it. You just know that the world has gone to shit. The police are basically working out a bombed out, whatever the hell you want to call it, some rundown goddamn building. Society looks like it's just hanging on by tethers. And all around this little hobble of a place that still plays like Civilization Matters, you have complete fucking anarchy. And that was really enticing and really enthralling and really mysterious because they never told you why. They never really explained to you why. You were just like, everything's falling to shit. Here you go. And you were like, wow. And in the back of your mind, you're always imagining, how did we get here? What caused this to take place? They kind of touch on it more in The Road Warrior. That's a different thing. But in this motion picture, it was kind of mysterious and that kind of lent to it, which was really kind of cool. And also, let's not forget, this motion picture was shot on a shoestring budget. There is not a set in this motion picture, which I love. It's all location shooting, which I love. And this motion picture it lends to the feel. It lends to the realism. It lends to the authenticity of this thing. Because you're like, this is no spruced up bullshit. This is just a motion picture that was shot with a great story, with whatever they had available, and made on a low budget. Beautifully done, beautifully told, but on a low budget, which kept it feeling real. It kept it feeling authentic. Even though there was some characters and you're like, this is a little bit crazy here. You know what I mean? The lawyers and some of those guys who are like, a little bit cartoonish. But you kept with it because everything around it felt so grounded in something you recognized, something real, something down to earth. It wasn't over the top, it wasn't stupid. But because it felt real, you could let the moments of silliness kind of pass by because you're like, let's face it, people would do silly shit in a crazy future like this anyway. And it just made it feel more down to earth and realistic. And one cannot talk about Mad Max without talking about the fact of its place in motion picture history. There was a slew of motion pictures that came out in the late 70s, probably to the early 80s, that really were so duplicated and copied that you can just see them in every motion picture afterwards. Obviously, Star Wars was like that. After Star Wars, you got a slew of shit like that. Obviously, Halloween was like that. I mean, Blade Runner, come on. They copied that motion picture so many ways in its look and its style and its vibe. Escape from New York, come on. You've seen the copycats. You've seen Escape from the Bronx, where the fuck kind of things they were doing. And, of course, you had Mad Max, which really, the look of it, the style of it, that thing was copied so many times over and over and over again in other motion pictures that it's not even funny. I mean, just the way that Max was dressed popped up in so many things, it was like completely off the hook. So this movie really jumped out there as one of 5 or 6 flicks from a certain era that was just copied and recopied and recopied, so you became used to the look and used to the style and used to the way it was made. And a couple final points before we end this video and tear on out of town. This motion picture actually has a really good soundtrack by Brian May. Not Brian May from Queen, but another composer, Brian May, who really did a good job for what this kind of motion picture was. At times a little hokey, but at times it fits perfectly for what this motion picture is. So the score, a win. And one thing also that must be taken into consideration with this motion picture was the camera crew, or basically it was 3 guys, who filmed this thing. In the eye of George Miller that directed this thing can never ever be understated. The use of the low angles really built such a feeling of speed in those car chases. Everything felt so fast and so authentic. And the chances that these people were taking when they were making this shit, I mean, there's photographs out there of like the cinematographer camera guys on the back of motorcycles doing 100 miles an hour, no helmets, no nothing, just tearing down the highway. The goddamn stuntmen, which you obviously seen in this movie, getting banged around and bumped and taking risks with the actors who took a lot of risks. I mean, you could not make a motion picture like this today. You could not get a motion picture like this even greenlit today. So, seeing what they did, the risks that they took, the extreme danger they put themselves in, and the revolutionary camera angles and things that they used to make you feel the speed and feel it. Yes, there was a couple scenes here and there where they sped up the film just a little bit. Sometimes not even in car scenes. I mean, sometimes it was just, you know, given the wave of the key as everybody's going by the, you know, the Nightrider's body, where you're like, they sped that up a little bit. Why'd they do it? But it didn't make a difference. It didn't take away from the fact that this movie was a real car movie, a real stunt movie, an in-camera action movie that, let's face it, folks, the days of this shit are over. All right, everybody, get out there and watch Mad Max. It was phenomenal. It was incredible, and it launched the whole thing. And let's be honest, too, The Road Warrior, it might have even eclipsed it. Another great motion picture we'll get to someday. The Road Warrior is phenomenal. Obviously, there was a third, Beyond Thunderdome, which was all right. It felt like it was a little bit watered down, tamed down, a little bit too much for the younger crowd. But it was there. And of course, years later, George Miller came back with Mad Max Fury Road. Phenomenal motion picture. As close as you're going to get to this motion kind of a picture ever again. I mean, with the stunts and the action and doing the shit in the camera, that is the only other example in modern history where you're going to get a motion picture that can go back to the old days, that can go back to the way things were made. That's the shining example, and that's kind of what made it great. Story cool? Yes. Should have had Mel Gibson in it. I know. He didn't want to do it, whatever. I think that was the only thing that really hurt the motion picture. If it was Mel, it would have been better for me, but still a great flick. Nonetheless, Tom Hardy did what he needed to do. It was what it was, is as it is. But get out there and watch the original Mad Max. It's the one that launched it. It's the one that started it. It's the one that means the most. All right, everybody, be good. Take care. Stay out of trouble. Be kind to a stranger. Be good to a friend. But above all else, never, ever, and I mean never, take any bullshit from anybody. See y'all soon.